I'm Jeff Zarnett, and this is Software Career Growth. Today, we're going to be talking about going on call, responding to incidents.
Red alert.
Today we're talking about going on call, sometimes called PagerDuty, although PagerDuty is the name of the company, and sometimes called incident response and that sort of thing. There are existing videos about this, and they do talk about using the tools, and in fact many of the services such as PagerDuty have videos that talk to you about good practices and things that you should do. And that's a good start, and realistically I'm hoping you've watched at least some of those at this point, but I want to talk about sort of using your head, making good decisions in these situations. And the first thing that I actually want to talk about in this is, should you be going on call at all? Now, I recognize that you might not have a choice. It may be the case that this is just sort of decided for you. Your manager says, all right, everybody in the team has to be on call, and that's what you have to do. But in other places, it's volunteer basis. And so that prompts the question of, should I volunteer? And there are some obvious and not so obvious points, right? The obvious point, this does potentially mean that if I'm on call, I can't go on a skiing vacation because I would be too far away from the laptop, and therefore I can't be on call during that vacation. So either I have to trade pager shifts in that time, or I have to figure out something else to do, or just decline the opportunity. On the other hand, being on call is appreciated, right? You are sharing a workload with your team members, and there's good incentives in being on call. That you care much more deeply about the quality of the software that you ship if something going wrong means you're the one who's woken up in the middle of the night. So that kind of thing does actually matter. But of course, life circumstances may not permit this to work, right? If you're a new parent, you are effectively already on call for your newborn child, so it's not really that easy to pick up the PagerDuty alerts when something goes wrong with software. However, in your team, there may be certain team dynamics, right? That maybe only more senior people are ready to go on call. Maybe you're too new, maybe you're too junior for that to be ready. On the other hand, people may be resentful if you're not doing a share of being on call. You are going to have to balance sort of the social situation, the personal situation, and the technical situation. Whatever you do, though, I would not recommend going on call if it is unpaid. You, again, may not be able to avoid it, but pager shifts, at least in my opinion, really should be compensated. There's a loss of flexibility inherent in this, right? If I am on PagerDuty, I have to be near my laptop, so maybe I can't do the hike in the remote area that I'd really like to do, or it might be disruptive to my plans to attend the opera on Friday. And if that's the case, right, I am sacrificing something, and it's really only fair that that sacrifice be compensated in some way. And so I would really not recommend doing this kind of thing for free, but I still think it's worth doing. I also think it's worth doing if you are a manager, even if you don't write code day to day. Although, the people who write the code day to day will certainly know the most about what's going on and sort of what is possibly going wrong, I still think you earn a lot of credit with your team by being on call in those situations, so that you are equally responsible for the work that we do, and that you are willing to step in, help out, and contribute during an incident. That earns a lot of respect. That earns a lot of points, right? Particularly in my experience in software, respect is a big part of being a manager, and you cannot lead a team effectively if they do not respect you and do not respect your technical skills. And that may include having to jump in on an incident, even if you've never written any of the code, you're completely unfamiliar with the change in question that maybe we suspect caused the problem, but you do your part anyway. Effort is appreciated, effort is noticed. So let's assume then that we're going on call. We've had at least a little bit of a pep talk from somebody. We understand how things work. Maybe you've been fortunate enough to have a practice incident, and then something goes wrong. And you have to make a decision at this point about, do we declare an alert, right? Is this a problem? or is it a false alarm? Do we need to bring in additional help? Do we need to wake up anybody? Do we need to start an incident for real? Your company policy, or if you're making one, decide a policy, says whether or not you should declare an incident in certain circumstances. If it's a minor loss of functionality or if it's cosmetic, you might say, well, there's no need to declare an incident and wake anybody up in the night, but we do need to address it. We do need to handle it. So think carefully about whether it's really urgent. There are endless fables, the boy who cried wolf, that dissuade us from the idea of declaring an alert unnecessarily. Okay, but let's say that there is actually a problem. Something is not working and we've identified this. In my experience, most of the time, the problem that we see is the result of a recent change. And it's usually a code change that has been deployed or an infrastructure change that has been applied or something like that. And that is where we would look for culprits, right? We're going to look at when did the problem start? We see it started at 1150. And around that time, we had a merge to this branch and a deployment that followed. Okay, that's a hint. It's not necessarily that. There are many things that could cause the start of an incident that are not related to a code change, or you could have a code change that was done before working hours and it only becomes a problem when customers start using the product for real during the day. But what's changed is usually a code change of some sort. And because that's your first suspect, you can hopefully find what you're looking for there and you know what to do. How to deal with it is more complicated. You have choices. For the most part, you can, go back, go forward, or do nothing. I'll talk about do nothing. It's not necessarily the right choice, but it's not necessarily the wrong choice either. Some things will resolve themselves given enough time, in which case, although it might be painful to wait it out, we'll just wait. And this is just the nature of things. Trying to change something would make it worse as opposed to better. Similarly, if you have an outage in some third-party service that you rely on, and that's the cause of the problem, probably not very much we can do. Hopefully it's been reported to that third party. They probably already know. But in that case, there's not a lot we can do. We can just sort of sit tight and go on to the next part of this, which is sort of about communication and what we do in that part of the incident response process. For some changes, we can just go back. A code change was added, it changed the functionality that is invoked here, and we can just revert that change in our version control system and apply the new version that has this removed, and problem is solved. That's good. Not always going to work, though. The thing that we might be concerned about is that sometimes we have to go forward as opposed to back. If the change that we are trying to revert had some structural change to the database, it may not be as simple as just prepare a revert commit and apply it and ready to go, or deploy a previous version of the software, and then, again, we're off to the races. That might not work because ultimately we might have made some change that it can't easily be undone or shouldn't easily be undone, in which case we might have to go forward. And going forward is kind of just what it sounds like. It's all right, we need to patch whatever we do, building on top of what already exists, as opposed to just reverting the change. There are other circumstances where going forward is somewhat helpful. If the problem is we're missing a null check on something and it results in a null pointer exception in Java, then we could go forward by applying a patch that has the missing null check, and that would be a way to go forward. You'll have to use your judgment about which of those things makes the most sense and which of those can be deployed in the quickest and least messy fashion. But every incident is different, so you're going to have to decide. But you don't have to decide alone, and that sort of takes us to communication. So when there's an incident, hopefully declaring an incident is a way of rallying support, getting more people to join in and help you out. And if they do, then we have some communication to do amongst the people who are responding to the incident to try to get everybody on the same page, coordinate the actions, make sure what's going on. This requires a certain amount of leadership. Someone has to be the incident commander, someone has to take charge of the situation and assign tasks and give an overview of what's happening and make sure that all parts of the problem are being addressed in the correct order. Communication also covers the idea of, say, a status page or notifying others outside of those who are responding to the incident of what's actually going on. Customers will be more understanding, generally speaking, if you are upfront about it and you say our service is experiencing a minor outage and we'll be back soon, thank you for your patience, as opposed to just stuff is broken and no one seems to notice or take any action based on that. And realistically, my opinion about this is that being upfront about downtime and things like that actually gets you more trust with the customer, and trying to cover it up causes you to lose their trust or lose face from their point of view. Because if you're not honest about the problems, like, how do we know when something is wrong? Are we aware of it? Are we doing something about it? Being honest is helpful. You may recall at some point in, I think it was 2022, there was a big incident with Atlassian where they had some major downtime and they were pretty silent about what was going on, and that was not well received by their customers. Okay, let's say that we've solved the issue. So we can say that we've resolved the incident. It's no longer actively on fire. That doesn't mean everything is over. There is still the possibility that there's some cleanup to do, and in that case, cleanup doesn't necessarily have to be done urgently. In fact, for a lot of things, the situation is not as urgent as it could be, and we can deal with it during business hours. Nobody has to be working over a weekend or on a holiday to clean up some of the things. For other cases, yes, unfortunately, we need to correct that as quickly as possible. These post-incident action items are important, and we need to follow them up to make sure they actually get done. If we don't, well, we leave customers unhappy, but also we're not preventing this problem from happening in the future. On that subject, right, every incident should have an associated incident report. The incident report should be reviewing, honestly, what happened, what went well, what went badly, what we would change. And an incident report not only needs to tell a story about what happened, but it needs to have action items. And the action items should be either cleaning things up or preventing the problem in the first place. Because prevention is better than cure, or at least much less costly than cure. And typically the advice that's given about post-mortem is to follow the Toyota methodology, which is 5 whys. We ask the question why 5 times to address root causes. And sometimes you will end up with something that requires less than that, and sometimes you'll end up with something that requires more. You don't want to have very shallow answers where you say, well, we deployed a bug and that was the cause of the problem. That's not enough, because it's not addressing the question of, well, how did we end up deploying the bug in the first place? Why didn't we catch it? But if you ask the question too many times, you end up with philosophical questions like, why are computers? And then your answers look like computers were a mistake, and that's not constructive, right? You're not going to solve anything by saying, well, we should never have written any software in the first place. And so these reviews need to be done in a formal way to verify that, okay, did we actually do the action items? Have we learned the right lessons? And recognize that it's going to take investment to prevent the problem from happening again in the future. And if we don't make that investment, then we know that someday this issue is likely to recur. So we would really like to prevent that. That's expensive. That's kind of painful. So learning lessons is key. And if you are responding to the incident, you are most likely a person who knows quite a lot about what happened, what you did not do, what was easy and what was hard. So your contribution to the post-incident action items is very valuable. That's not to say you have to solve everything yourself, right? If you are a front-end developer responding to an incident and the problem lies in a back-end service, you don't have to become a back-end developer to fix it. However, it is still incumbent on you to identify what went wrong and get some action items on the board so that someone can get in there and fix it. Ultimately, is being on call worth it? I suppose it depends, right? For some people, I think they really like it. There's a certain thrill of like, all right, the building is on fire and we're going to go extinguish the fire, and let's go, let's do it. I don't think everybody has that attitude, and I think for some people the idea of being on call is actually quite annoying, that you have to disrupt what you're doing and respond to the incident. So you may or may not enjoy it on its own merit. But certainly it is something that is appreciated, right? Or it should be appreciated. If management doesn't appreciate the people who do incident response, that's concerning. It's not unheard of, but it is concerning. But you are still, prioritizing the customer. You are still putting a lot of effort in to make sure that things work the way that they're supposed to work and to deal with it when they don't. And ultimately, the cost-benefit analysis hopefully comes down on the side of, yeah, this is actually worth doing. It's also an opportunity to learn a lot. You will inevitably, as things grow, be paged to a service that you've never heard of, you have no idea what it does, you've never seen it before, and it forces you to learn about it in a quick way and try to diagnose what's wrong and try to come up with a solution. Is that good? I mean, I think so, but you tell me, right? Sometimes you will get thrown into something that has technology way outside your expertise, in which case you're going to need to call for some help. And that's okay. I didn't mention this under communication, but really I should have, that in any on-call rotation, it's extremely unlikely that you're going to be completely alone, that there's nobody else who is able or willing to help, and that you have to solve the problem completely on your own. Calling in people who know more about the subject, or calling in people who can help, or even just calling in people who have administrative access to things that you don't, will be inevitably a part of solving the problem. And that's okay. This is not something that you have to solve completely on your own. You're not failing at your duty if you ask people for help. You're doing a good job, actually. If this is something that you can't solve yourself, or you just want somebody to review the thing that you're about to do, or you want somebody to offer a second opinion, that's doing your job, because the focus is on restoring the functionality, helping the customer, solving the issue, and not really about who did what and was it my responsibility, or who gets the credit for this and that. So ultimately, those sorts of things are good, right? They force you to learn things, they force you to engage with technologies or systems that you've never engaged with before, gets you working with people, and hopefully it gets you noticed, appreciated by others. So I come down just in favor of, yeah, I think you should do it. Again, you may have reasons why it doesn't make sense for you, but it's a thing that I would recommend. And in a future video, I will probably talk about postmortems and like how to do those well, because there's much more to talk about than we could talk about in this video, but I think we'll cut it off here for now. And thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.